Hey everybody, it's Sonny here with the Keeper's Corner, and today we're going to be checking out our very first hero feature. And for our very first go around here, we're going to be looking at the Monk. Now, the Monk is of course a hero that's typically not very often used in the lower level brackets, but he's one that I definitely want everyone to keep in mind as they progress and get closer to those higher level brackets, and of course get closer to level 50. And that is because the Monk is a very, very, very powerful single strike damage hero and a very viable frontline hero. I know a lot of people will be struggling to find frontline heroes as they move past their Knight and their Templar, and ultimately, myself, I've struggled in leveling up to find alternatives to those heroes. And once you get to the level 50 range, it does really open up a lot of new options for frontline heroes. And the first of which I would definitely suggest looking into is the Monk. Now, the requirements for this build are going to be the Jade Fist of Kwang Huo. One of the very, very cool things about this Jade Fist, however, is it has the highest initial craft level of any epic weapon. The craft level with your artisans at level 48, which is my current keeper level, is 55 plus. And most epics are in the 48 to 52 range. I want to say there's only one or two that are 52. The rest are all very, very low in comparison. So it has a very high initial craft rate, a very good return, and it does have the initiative boost, the crit damage boost, and very, very important for the build on the Monk here is the +7 all resistance and the 150 health, which we'll see is going to combine very well here with the 25% magic resistance and the 350 health on the Aetheron Robes, as well as the 2% dodge, which has some synergy with the Monk's setup as well. And for skills, we're going to be using the Kai Shout, the Kai Strike, and Zen State. And one of the reasons that the Monk is so much more viable at later levels, other than just the epic gear here, is the great, great value of his stars when it comes to boosting the percentage on this Kai Shout. At 6 and 7 stars, you can see mine is only currently 5, but you gain about 15% damage on Kai Shout per star level. So with an additional 30% from being star level 7, your next attack will be doing 220 to 225 bonus damage as opposed to the 197 that I currently have. And the other very important skill in this setup here is the Kai Strike. Now, the Kai Strike is a short cooldown that matches the Kai Shout, so they typically always go off back to back. A lot of other players that use it call it the Kiki Shout. So you get your Kai Shout and then your Kai Strike one after another, and it's really, really effective at taking out opposing frontline tanks. And the reason for that being that Kai Strike is a true damage skill. Now, most true damage skills we see, like the archers, the ninja, they are typically very low damage. And even though this seems to be a low damage skill, because of the bonus from that Kai Shout, it's actually one of the heaviest hitting abilities in terms of a single strike melee damage hero. And it doesn't require any sort of real synergy with other heroes to still hit big. You know, you have the Kensai, for example, that really needs to be paired with the War Master or the Necromancer, for example, to put out those big damage hits. The True Strike here is going to allow us to cut through armor rating, and unless the enemy has a super high defense rating, it's going to allow us to do some serious damage. And the third ability here, and this is what allows us to put our Monk in the front line here at later levels, is the Zen State. And the Zen State increases his dodge rating, his defense rating, and it gives a pretty significant heal. And this is another example of why the Monk is one of those heroes that benefits so greatly from stars because of the percent gains to defense and the bonuses to dodge from level to level. At a 5% defense gain per star, as you can imagine, the difference between 4 stars and 7 stars really, really changes the Monk's ability to tank in the front line, because when you get 2 epic items and a pretty high base pool of defense, that 15% additional defense really adds up. And not to mention the base attack and defense gains from those stars themselves is about 225, I want to say, from 4 to 7. So 15% of that is going to be pretty significant. And then, of course, his passives here are going to increase his attack and defense by another percentage base, which, again, is very important for the star levels. So you really don't want to ignore your monk coming up simply because he's not as viable at lower levels. And the final skill here that's going to really bolster out his ability to tank in the front line is, of course, his Iron Body. That gives him a percent armor increase that is pretty comparable to wearing a plate mail armor. So you see he comes in here at 46.7% armor with this setup. We're looking at just about 1,000 attack and defense, 1,700 health, and his resistances across the board are pretty decent. So we'll go ahead and check out the monk here in a Wizard's Chosen battle because there don't seem to be very many opponents on right now for typical hero battles. But an example of a good lineup here that would work with the monk is the Druid to invigor him and keep those Kai Shout and Kai Strikes running. The Samurai as a wing taunt there and a attack reduction for the opposing team. And the Barbarian for a defense reduction to help boost the damage of that true damage skill on the monk. As we talked about, defense is the real only way to prevent true damage or reduce true damage. Another good example here would be to put in the Ranger for the initiative increase. In that case, the Ranger could even tank in the front line, although we'll get to those builds in another video here for the Ranger. And of course the Mystic, who I have not really worked on her star level or hero level yet. But the Mystic, of course, we will look at in another video as well. Her Foretell to boost dodge, as well as her own cooldown reduction, and her base all resist boost for the monk will really help him out in terms of survivability and building a good evasion team. However, we'll jump into a Wizard's Chosen here and check out just how the monk performs. Hopefully we don't get a turtle squad, which would, of course, be the Paladin, the War Master, the Samurai, and the Necromancer. Because in that situation, they boost their defense so significantly that it really becomes frustrating when trying to use a true damage skill as your main source of damage output. And you'll see this isn't always necessarily the best team in Wizards Chosen battles, nor is it necessarily the best team for using the monk in general. The purpose here, of course, is just to show the value of Kai Shout and Kai Strike, and to show the monk's value as a frontliner. And of course, once you get up to level 50, the Wizard's Chosen battles become much, much more difficult because the enemies are all 7-starred. So if you come up to level 50 with some lower star heroes, don't be worried if you have trouble with the Wizard's Chosen. It'll just take a little time to balance those star and enchant levels out. But as you saw there, the monk hit for a pretty significant 700 damage on the Shaman there, and the Shaman is a fairly decent resist hero. And another thing to note when using your Druid here, you really want to be mindful of where you put your Invigors. As you can see, I've had my monk targeted throughout this because we're trying to highlight him. But there is some value in Mr. Raven Plus, if anybody is familiar with him. He is one of the more highly regarded PvP players here in the Tower Keepers community. But he really does impart a lot of value on tanks who can serve their purpose and then die while you continue to go on and complete a stage. And in this instance, the purpose of the monk would, of course, be to take out that frontline taunt, especially if you're dealing with a wing taunt as well. the monk really helps to get that focus out of the frontline heroes. This particular formation in Wizards Chosen is, of course, a bad example for that value because of the reverse 3-1 setup, which you typically will never see in hero battles. And you'll see there I sent the Invigor to the Druid. That will allow her to get an additional Cyclone, Entangle, slow them down. When you outnumber your opponent, you typically want to focus on slows and entangles and things like that because you'll get so many more attacks than they do. You'll typically always have the advantage. And the same goes for stuns in a 3-on-2 or 2-on-1 situation. Anytime you can drop a stun right before their cycle is going to help you get off those extra few attacks you'll need to gain the advantage. Now, of course, you can see the value of the Wing Taunt and the Samurai here is to help keep the Druid and the Barbarian alive once the Monk falls. And that's one thing you have to keep in mind when you move away from using taunt tanks like the Knight and the Templar, that it is okay sometimes for your frontline hero to take a fall. But as you can see, that is one run with the Knight there, or the Monk there in the front line. And if I'm not mistaken, we can go and look at a replay here that will highlight the Monk in a traditional hero battle. Now, this, of course, is not a terribly great opponent in terms of gear and stars and things like that. But he will be using a more traditional formation that we can get an idea of how the Monk performs against a tank taunt. And as you can see, he does have the taunt up, but regardless of that, I still would have put the Baleful Glare on the front hero in that situation. Again, you want to decrease the defense to increase the true damage. Now, of course, the Monk is an uncommon hero, so you really want to make sure that you're doing Find Loot on him at least 2 times a day, if not 3 times a day. The uncommon heroes, of course, have a very high drop chance for Soul Stones and Find Loot. And you additionally want to be buying his Hero Stones, or his Soul Stones in the Hero Shop with gold as often as they appear. But as you can see against these lesser geared opponents here, the Monk really does some devastating amounts of true damage. And the same will be the case if you get him up to that 6 and 7 star mark and get those epics enchanted, things like that. You're really going to see him perform at that same level against high tier opponents. And unfortunately, I'm still working on that myself. I'm just a little bit off from his 6 stars here because I did neglect him on my way up. So I really wanted to highlight him first. So a lot of people realize that he is a hero that they definitely want to be focusing on as they level up, and make sure that they are prepared when they get to the level 50 range for the heroes and the teams that they're going to be running into, but also to give themselves a little bit more diversity in terms of their frontline options and things like that. So anyways, we're going to cut this one here. If you guys want to check out the upcoming hero features, make sure you subscribe to the Keeper's Corner here. If you have any heroes, skills, epics, anything like that that you'd like me to feature or showcase, make sure you leave it in the comments section below, and we will catch you guys next time. Thank you very much for watching the Keeper's Corner.